Welcome to this explainer. Now, usually when we think of Bhutan, we hear all about gross national happiness, right? We picture this beautiful, serene kingdom nestled way up high in the Himalayas. But today, we're going to put on our detective hats. We're going to look right past the philosophy and dig into some truly fascinating data behind Bhutan's hydropower-led economy. I absolutely love looking at good graphs and charts, and I'm so glad you're here with me today to do just that. We're going to take our time, go step by step, and really break down the numbers that tell the hidden story of how this unique country actually functions. So let's dive into this mystery together. Just like any good classroom lecture, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the economic boom, move on to what true productivity actually means, explore the hydropower paradox, compare Bhutan to its neighbors, unpack the non-electricity struggle, and finally, look at powering the future. Let's get right to it. Section 1, the Bhutanese economic boom. We're going to start by looking at the shiny surface of Bhutan's economy, because honestly, it looks incredibly impressive right now. Right out of the gate, look at this massive number, 7.5%. In 2024, the entire Bhutanese economy grew by 7.5%. Just think about that for a second. In our modern global economy, where so many developed nations are fighting tooth and nail just to hit 1 or 2%, growing by 7.5% in a single year is a massive bounce back. Now, this fantastic growth happened for a few key reasons. Tourists started visiting those beautiful mountains again, everyday people inside the country started spending more money, and brand new, giant hydropower plants were finally coming online. Hydropower, which is basically taking the immense flow of river water rushing down those steep mountains and turning it into electricity, is literally the engine of Bhutan's economy. And this engine has a really powerful effect on the everyday workers. When we look at this bar chart here, you can see a striking trend. Since 1990, the amount of value each individual worker creates in Bhutan has grown by 5.3% every single year. That is a long time to sustain such rapid growth. I mean, it completely outpaces the entire South Asian region. Year after year, decade after decade, the value generated per person just keeps climbing. And you know, when workers can produce more value, an economy usually thrives. So looking from the outside in, Bhutan seems to be doing absolutely wonderfully. Section 2. What is true productivity? Because if we really want to understand an economy, like real economic detectives, we have to look much deeper than just how much the workers are churning out. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding a concept called total factor productivity, or TFP for short. Think of TFP as a measure of how smartly we use our tools. It's this sort of hidden magic that tells us if we're actually getting better and more efficient at making things, or if we're just throwing more money at the problem. For instance, imagine you run a bakery. If you buy 10 expensive new ovens, well, of course you're going to bake more cookies. Your total output naturally goes up. But your total factor productivity, that only goes up if you figure out a better recipe or a faster way to mix the dough without having to buy yet another expensive oven. TFP is all about true efficiency. It's about working smarter, not just harder. And here is the exact mystery we are trying to solve today. Look at these two numbers side by side. On one hand, worker productivity is booming at 5.3% a year. Awesome, right? But on the other hand, the efficiency of the money invested, the tools, the machines, those giant dams, which we call capital productivity, is actually shrinking. It's dropping by 2.7% every single year. Imagine pouring millions of dollars into a business, only to find out every new dollar you put in is doing less work than the last one. Bhutan is pouring more and more money into these giant projects, but over time, that money is getting less and less efficient at generating real wealth. Section 3, the hydropower paradox. To solve this mystery of shrinking money efficiency, we have to look directly at the massive dams powering the country. Now, I absolutely love this donut chart because it just makes the situation so incredibly clear. When we break down where Bhutan's economic growth actually comes from, a staggering 80.1% of it is just capital input. That is just a fancy way of saying they are spending massive, massive amounts of money building huge dams. Another nearly 20% comes from labor. But look at that last piece. The measure of true efficiency, total factor productivity, our smart growth metric, is sitting at practically 0%. Over 30 whole years, almost all of Bhutan's growth has come from simply pouring vast amounts of money into concrete and turbines, not from actually getting smarter or more efficient at running their economy. So why is this money becoming less efficient? Well, building megaprojects in the Himalayas is incredibly tough. You have massive construction costs right from the start. And then, drilling through a mountain is completely unpredictable. You hit bad rock, extreme weather stops construction for months on end, and as a result, these mega projects are constantly delayed. They end up taking years longer to build than originally planned. These tough engineering environments mean that building every new dam gets more difficult and way more expensive than the last one. Because these projects take so long and because the budgets just balloon so drastically, the money they spend on them just isn't working as efficiently as it used to. Hey, just a quick pause here. If you're enjoying this detailed explainer and you love digging into good graphs and charts as much as I do, please take a second to hit subscribe and share this with a friend who loves learning. It really helps us bring more of these deep dive, lecture-style explainers right to your screen. All right, let's get back to the mystery. Section 4, comparing the neighbors. Let's zoom out a bit and step outside of Bhutan to see the bigger picture. Take a look at this bar chart here. When we compare this SMART growth metric, total factor productivity, to Bhutan's neighbors over the same time frame, a stark contrast emerges. India has seen steady efficiency growth over the past few decades. Sri Lanka sits right in the middle, managing to improve how smartly they work too. But Bhutan's efficiency growth? It's completely flat. They have consistently lagged behind India and Sri Lanka by about 1 to 2 percentage points for decades. Basically, while India was busy figuring out better recipes for their entire economy, Bhutan was relying on just buying more ovens in the form of massive physical dams. But here is where it gets kind of wild. Normally, if an economy is inefficient, you see skyrocketing local prices. If you're way less productive than your giant neighbor, everyday goods become very expensive for your citizens. But interestingly, even though Bhutan is significantly less productive than India, they actually have very low domestic inflation. Their prices don't skyrocket. Why? Well, it's because the government uses that abundant hydropower to provide cheap, highly subsidized energy to its people, alongside receiving external grants. This keeps their local prices artificially low, which effectively creates this very unique, highly protective economic bubble around the entire country. Section 5, the non-electricity struggle. Because logically, you might be wondering about that protective bubble. You'd think cheap power equals hyper-efficient factories, right? If your energy costs almost nothing, your local businesses should easily outcompete foreign rivals. But the data tells a completely different story. Despite having all this abundant, affordable hydropower, efficiency in everyday manufacturing is totally stagnant. That cheap power simply hasn't magically spilled over to help factories, local shops, or trade businesses become more efficient. They're struggling to grow their smart productivity, just like the heavy hydropower sector itself. Let's walk through this timeline together to see exactly why this happens. Trace the year with me. In November, way up in the high mountains, it gets freezing cold. The rivers literally begin to freeze, and the water flow naturally decreases. Next, we move to December. Because there's less water spinning those giant turbines, hydropower generation drops sharply. Finally, we hit January. It's freezing across the country. Everyone turns on their heaters. Heating demand spikes right when the power generation is at its absolute lowest. Because of this harsh reality of nature, factories simply cannot rely on a stable power supply in the winter. And you know, if a factory loses power, its machines stop and it loses money. And because of this winter freeze, Bhutan is forced into a truly shocking situation. Look at this number, 95.1%. By the year 2026, they are projected to import electricity equal to 95.1% of their export levels during low water flow periods just to keep the lights on and the heaters running. Think about how ironic that is. A country that is globally famous for exporting massive amounts of hydropower actually has to buy almost the exact same amount of power back from its neighbors in the winter just to survive the cold. It is incredibly difficult to run a highly efficient modern manufacturing economy when your baseline power supply is this highly seasonal. Section 6, powering the future. So how does Bhutan fix this reliance on raw money, overcome the winter power shortage, and find true efficiency in the modern world? Well, the exciting part is that Bhutan actually has massive future opportunities that don't rely on winter river flows. First off, they can expand solar power grids to help balance out the energy supply when the rivers freeze. But more importantly, instead of just trying to build traditional, heavy manufacturing factories, which need constant, massive industrial power, what if Bhutan used its cheap energy to power the internet age? They could develop advanced telecommunications, export digitally traded services, or even participate in generative AI tasks. Running data centers or training a workforce to do international digital work doesn't require the same heavy, massive physical infrastructure as, say, a giant steel mill. In the digital world, work can be shifted and scaled globally, making that winter power stability much, much easier to manage. As we wrap up this explainer, the data leaves us with one really fascinating question to ponder. Can this beautiful country transition from just building physical dams to powering the global digital economy? Can they finally boost that true efficiency, total factor productivity, by working smarter in the cloud rather than just drilling harder into the rock? I think it's going to be incredibly exciting to watch Bhutan's economy evolve over the next decade. Thank you so much for sitting through this detailed explainer with me today, for analyzing the charts, and for learning how to see the macroeconomic world just a little bit more clearly. Keep asking great questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.